right, welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's talk about the Epstein files. NPR had this exclusive yesterday, and many news outlets have reported on it since, saying that the Justice Department has withheld some Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor. The DOJ reportedly also removed some documents from the public database where accusations against Jeffrey Epstein also mention Trump. Let's go over some of what the DOJ is saying about this. They have responded, saying in part, as the Department of Justice has consistently said and has done since the January 30th, 2026 publication of the Epstein files, if any member of the public, including victims, reported concerns with information in the pages, the department would review, make any corrections, and republish online. The statement continues. Several individuals and news outlets have reportedly flagged files related to documents produced to Ghislaine Maxwell in discovery of her criminal case that they claim appear to be missing. As with all documents that have been flagged by the public, the department is currently reviewing files within that category of the production. Should any documents be found that have been improperly tagged in the review process and is responsive to the act, the department will, of course, publish it consistent with the law. Standing by is Kalen Deese. He's a Justice Department reporter with the Washington Examiner. Kalen, you and I have talked about the Epstein files in recent months. We've known that some files have not been made public, but they reportedly include what appear to be more than 50 pages of FBI interviews, as well as notes from conversations with a woman who accused Trump of sexual abuse decades ago when she was a minor. For viewers trying to separate politics from facts here, what's the most important thing to understand about what has and has not been released so far?
Well, thanks for having me on, Austin. And yes, the documents that we're talking about, the NPR first reported about, concern FBI 302s from alleged victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And also, like you said, includes some pretty salacious allegations about the current president. What's important to understand is that many of these FBI 302s that we've discussed over the past several months are included in the Epstein files released. There's plenty of very damning, maybe on the surface, types of allegations that have been made about Trump that we've seen included in the Epstein tranche of files. Now, with this allegation that these files have been removed, it is very alarming, to say the least, that there's people coming out saying that there's information that they expected to be released in the files that isn't out there. Many of these 302s you have to take with a large grain of salt, because the FBI has gone through them. Many of the investigators have come out and said in some of these subsequent reports about the 302s that they did not deem the underlying allegations to be credible. But still, the idea that there are allegedly more documents out there that pertain to the president currently is something that, at this point, it's getting a little bit hard to reconcile that some of these things are still missing. I just want to say, outright, though, that the way that the Epstein Files Transparency Act is written, it doesn't cover every single item under the sun. It doesn't even mention, at one point, in the omissions category, it doesn't even talk about attorney-client privilege matters. That's a decision that the DOJ has made on its own to withhold anything that might be included in the files that are attorney-client privilege. Same thing goes for their comments about duplicative materials. But I also just want to add another part of the Epstein Files Transparency Act that does mention something very specific, and that's referring to matters that might include national security information. It makes a point to say that the Attorney General shall release an unclassified summary for each of the redacted or withheld classified information. And I point that out to mention that there have not been any sort of summaries of information that's been withheld, potentially for national security information. We have no sort of information that's providing context about maybe stuff that was withheld. So, just to get out on the surface, it doesn't seem like that the DOJ is complying with each bullet point of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. As we know, that they are the final arbiter, determiner of what they decide to release, even though there's a law in the books that says that they have to. So while this DOJ might be doing its own thing in the way that it's complying with the law, of course, you're seeing Democrats out there who are saying that if anything is found that this current administration has not released in accordance with the law, they have sort of dangled the threat of potential, future investigations that could come in a sort of a post-Trump presidency era. So it's definitely something that I think the current leadership in the DOJ should be very reticent about, because if they aren't complying with this law, even though it might not come back to get them now, it could potentially get back to them later.
You know, one thing I think a lot of people are wondering about is there any evidence out there that the DOJ has had internal discussions about how to handle documents that involve high-profile names like President Trump?
Well, there's certainly been an allegation that was made public recently by, I believe it was reporter Lisa Rubin. And it was talking about a memo that was from the Deputy Director Todd Blanche that was talking about wanting staff in the DOJ to flag any potential 302s, which is sort of, from a public reaction standpoint, I would say has fueled a little bit of the concern about the recent revelations made in the NPR report. But at the same time, I go back to the initial point that I made a minute ago, that there are so many what would be otherwise very damning and, so I would say reputation tarnishing allegations that have been made about not just the president, but other high profile individuals as part of this current 3.5 million document release that the public can go out and view at any point. But the problem is, as I said before, is that there is FBI agents who have looked through some of these allegations, and they have come to the conclusion that some of them just can't be corroborated or verified. The other part of this, too, that I think is a little bit frustrating from a coverage standpoint is that even though there's the many parts of the public that are frustrated with a lack of maybe quote unquote accountability that's taken place in the United States over Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. There is also the fact here that if there was, for instance, a 302 that this administration decided to look back retrospectively and decide, well, maybe past investigations maybe glossed over this one. Maybe we want to take a look into this and see if there's any credibility or veracity to it. It's not a document that they're going to make public, because if it's part of an active investigation, they don't want to taint any potential case that could be brought up from it. So it's really a point of frustration, I think, that if you're not clued into what the DOJ's modus operandi is, which is they don't talk about ongoing investigations. If there's a particular document that a alleged victim is pointing out saying, why isn't this here? It's not so much to say as, or to indicate that that is a potential matter that's under active investigation, but it's definitely something to consider. If anything's missing, maybe there's elements of missing documents that might be part of the active investigations.
Here's President Trump at the State of the Union yesterday. I don't believe I heard him address the Epstein file, at least not significantly, during his State of the Union address last night. I'm curious, Kaylin, is there any indication that additional Trump-related documents could be released in future disclosure phases? And on top of that, is it clear to us how much hasn't been released from the DOJ's case files yet?
Well, Austin, it's funny you mentioned future disclosure because at this point, from the words of the department heads, from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, there's no indication at this point that there will be future disclosures. Now, I think we have to also take that with a major grain of salt, because we saw what happened last July with the 2-page memo that said that there weren't going to be any further releases or matters pertaining to the Epstein debacle, scandal, whatever you want to call it. Of course, now that sort of flies in the face of the administration, because since then we've seen so many tranches of formerly sealed documents that have been released. So I don't ever want to be caught saying never in this regard. And certainly, if there's currently a pressure campaign that's being boiled up right now, if there's alleged victims that are saying that their 302s aren't being showcased. Of course, if none of those 302s are part of the active investigations, then there's no reason, in accordance with the law, for them to be kept under lock and key. Then certainly there might be enough pressure for additional files releases, as we've seen already, as history has sort of taught us in a very short time. But at the same time, you have to consider that these lawmakers, if there's any information that they feel is being blocked out or redacted, they have at any point in time the ability to go over to the DOJ and look at more of those unredacted filings so that they can make maybe a future determination, like we've seen with Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, and say, just send basically a blanket call to the DOJ online and say, hey, why are these documents still redacted? I mean, they can do that day in and day out if they would like. But as for the matters that were reported about NPR, I do think that if Democrats are able to keep up more pressure on this issue, and if the claims by the people that were cited in the NPR story are true, that they are missing, then perhaps there is more stuff down the line that we could see being released from the Epstein trove.
Kaylin Deese covers the Department of Justice for the Washington Examiner. How can people track your coverage, Kaylin?
If you want to follow what I'm writing about, you can follow me on X. That's Kaylin DC, Kaelan DC, and follow me at my byline at WashingtonExaminer.com.
Good to see you, man. Thank you.